it's a process of how to turn your relationship into like a crucible or a container for healing, growth, transformation, and connection, because they're all inherently related. So we start with, and this is what separates us from, regular therapy. We start with embodiment and having a connection to our nervous system and our body, because we need to be regulated to be able to use relational tools. Like when you're triggered, like you revert into a primitive part of your brain, and when you're in that place, your brain, your body, your nervous system doesn't care about connection. It just wants to get its own way. So having a connection to your nervous system is also really important to create empathy and being able to feel the other person. So many women complain that their partners don't feel them because so many of us are conditioned to be in our minds, and we come at relationship from a place to problem solve or fix, or if she's got something going on, here's the answer to your problem. And so empathy is also through body to body. And then we work in showing couples what's going on when they're triggered, how they can contain that part of themselves that doesn't care about connection. We call that part the adaptive child. And this is where knowing our history and how we've been conditioned becomes really important, because when we are triggered and we revert into that primitive part of our brain, we start to play out all the ways that we were either conditioned to be as children or we were allowed to be with no boundaries. So this is why when we're triggered in relationship, it's the past coming into the present as an opportunity to be integrated, so that we can also bring the unconscious to the conscious and therefore be free of the past to create a new future. Which I know, Adam, for you is really big. Like, we want to create a new, better future for our children. We don't want to pass on, I'm just hearing a biblical term, the sins of our fathers. Right? We're not wanting to pass on those generational curses and ancestral traumas. That happens in relationship. There's only so much you can do in individual therapy. At the end of the day, our attachment wounds get triggered in relationship. And when our children are challenging us, it's also an opportunity for us to reclaim and reparent our own inner child. And that's why these relational skills are foundational. They are the evolutionary edge of where we're being asked to grow as human beings.
G'day, folks. Adam Gibson here from Parents with Questions. Look, as most of you listening to this would know, I've spent about the last 6 years of my life banging on about freedom and how do we fix broken systems in this country, around health and education and our finances and our food systems, and really the freedom to have our own thought processes and question and have disagreements with people and, take different perspectives in a time when, the narrative is the only thing you've been allowed to agree with officially. So it's been a really interesting time in my life to see the lack of ability to just have conversations and have different points of view. And, those things have been really weaponized against us, I think. But equally, that dynamic has played out into, I think, a lot of movements in the Freedom Network and, things that had great potential, including some of the projects we've started, like the Family Farm, have been, if not sidelined, then slowed down dramatically by sort of the inability or the unwillingness of those involved to have more constructive conversations and relationship. And I'd put my hand up as part of that as well. So I think, possibly today's episode is about this topic and how we, I guess, reintroduce curiosity over conflict, and maybe considering that our biggest challenge isn't about creating new systems or movements. It's about who do we become in the process of stewarding them and navigating the challenges that come up. So to help us along that path, I've introduced, or invited, I should say, Aaron Christos and Greer Ashley from Intimacy for Couples. And I know these guys socially and have, I got kind of dragged along by the scruff of the neck to a workshop by my wife to their workshop recently and was very impressed with, and challenged by a lot of the things they brought up and the tools they use. So I thought we'd bring them along today to talk about, I guess, not specifically relationship coaching, but that certainly comes into it because this dynamic applies across families, it applies across communities, committees, political movements, and ultimately across international politics. But I think a theme here is that potentially these skills really can be learnt and practiced and honed first in the home, in the family. So we'll start with that. But Aaron and Greer, thanks for joining us on Parents with Questions after my long introduction.
Thank you.
So welcome. It's a real honor, Adam.
Thanks, guys. Look, just to kick off, a lot of people hear about relationship coaching and they immediately think, counselling for couples in crisis, that kind of thing. Is that what we're talking about here? Because this is your skill set, but this is just talk a little bit about what your skill set is and who it's for, I guess. And I'll let either of you go at it. It's always tricky. You have the two of you there.
Sure.
Whoever would like to speak.
Yeah, so we work with couples and as well as individuals who are really committed to their own growth and evolution. And that, as anyone in relationship would know, our stuff comes up in relationship. And so we consider that relationship is really the perfect container in which to awaken to our own stuff and our own shadowy nature and the things that we don't realize about ourselves, and then to actually work together and working as a team to take 100% responsibility for our half of the relationship in support of one another.
And you go
ahead, Aaron. Sorry. Just how does that relate to, just to go back to my point, is that am I right in assuming this dynamic kind of relates to or underpins all relationships, no matter whatever level, from the home to international, like I did? Is that a fair call?
Yeah, I think so. And I think to expand that conversation and weave it into a greater context, we really need to speak about what paradigm and level of consciousness we've been operating in historically, in the recent history. We've been in an individualistic culture where it's about me, and what I can gain. We've also been swimming in the waters of patriarchy as well, and that's not a slant or a criticism or blame on men. Our belief is that men and women both have masculine, feminine energies and qualities, and that it's an imbalance in our psyche that leads us to value more feminine qualities more and to dismiss or judge or suppress feminine qualities. So a woman can embody patriarchy as much as men. And an example I like to give of that is Gina Reinhardt. That's a woman that embodies patriarchy. And it's important to understand where we've been to understand where we're going.
I can almost see really the social media comment. I can almost see the response to that comment, mate. When you mentioned Gina, but keep going.
Yeah, I think it's a good one because the implications of embodying that consciousness is really obvious. It serves a small few or the individual to the detriment of the collective, and spreading that out even into the earth. So it's really important to understand where we've been to know where we're going, because we're wanting to move and evolve and grow out of that paradigm and that consciousness into one that is more harmonious, is more interdependent and community-based. And it's great to value these things and value connection, but it requires a skill. And that's often what's lacking in so many couples that we work with is a lack of skill. They've got the desire, they've got the willingness to have a loving, harmonious, connected relationship, but they don't have the understanding of how to do that. And then what we've found is that when couples embark on this journey in having a more harmonious, respectful, connected relationship, the skills that are required to do that then flow out into their workplace, into their communities, and most importantly, their children.
Mate, well, that resonates with this audience. And I know that's, as a mate of mine, Blake, who interviewed me, Blake Worrell Thompson, he said his catch cry is, do the work so your kids don't have to. And it kind of resonates. Yeah. Just come back to, I'm interested, the patriarchy point you made was interesting because I have seen, anyway, I don't want to go off too far down that rabbit hole because it's a whole conversation. But is there something to blame or pinpoint on the New Age movement of the last, 30 years or so, that whole thing of, self-expression and I'm so important and I'll do me and all that kind of, is there a New Age element of individualism that's been sort of normalized on us, do you think? Do you draw a line between those things?
Well, I think there's been a necessary liberation that we saw in the 1960s. And I think what we're swimming in at the moment is the lack of containment around that liberation. And that's why so many of us are yearning for actually to return to a bit more of conservative, traditional ways, because the pendulum has swung too far. And this is something that happens within growth and healing and evolution is, say we've had a real lack of boundaries, then quite often we'll swing to the other side and we've got to be really rigid and have really strong boundaries in order to find that middle point. And it's a similar thing if we haven't had a connection with our anger and we've been suppressing our anger. Sometimes we've got to swing the pendulum and go into rage and just really let that out in order to then come back to the middle. And I think, in the 60s with that cultural revolution, there was a necessary liberation in many ways, sexual orientations and everything. And I think the pendulum has just swung so far the other side where it's like we've got so much sexualization shoved in our faces that we actually need to contain that and have some more modesty.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a good response. Come back on track here to come back to my notes on where I wanted to take this, but because you got me intrigued there. But I think it's fair to say for everyone listening, the world has been chaotic in the last half a decade or so. Is an understatement, and it's perfect time to see that any kind of small crack in a relationship is going to become a chasm pretty quickly in those times. Can you just speak to that? And what's the context? What are relationships? Are we getting tested out, or is it just that was already there, or are we just seeing, is it becoming more in our face? What do you see happening on that front? Before we jump back into today's conversation, I just want to take 60 seconds to say thanks for listening. Look, if you've been following Parents with Questions for a while now, we've never put the podcast behind a paywall. We've never asked for Patreon support or asked you to buy us a coffee or anything like that. We've always felt it was important that this information we share is freely available for families who are trying to raise healthy, resilient, critical thinking kids in an otherwise uncertain world, and we intend to keep it free and available for everyone. But if you value what we're doing, there is now one simple way you can support us. And as many of you know, my wife Fiona recently started a little family business called Rocket Fuel. It all began because we couldn't find a genuinely nutritious breakfast for our kids that was also quick and easy on busy school mornings. The supermarket shelves were really full of sugary cereals and highly processed convenient foods that were kind of masquerading as health foods. But we wanted something that would actually fuel our own kids properly for the day. So Fiona created it herself. Other parents at the local primary school started asking what we were giving our kids for breakfast. The kids started sharing it at lunchtime if they took it in their lunchbox. The word spread, and before we knew it, our little family breakfast had become a small family business. Rocket Fuel is packed with quality protein, healthy fats, medium-chain triglycerides or MCTs. It's full of minerals, real food ingredients, and absolutely nothing artificial. It mixes up in about 30 seconds, and because it's designed to provide steady energy, the kids don't get any mid-morning sugar crash or the roller coaster that comes with so many typical breakfasts. And there is a 100% money-back guarantee that both you and your kids will absolutely love it. It's very easy to digest. It keeps the kids fuller for longer. It helps support focus and concentration at school, and it gives them the kind of brain fuel and nutrition they need to get the best possible start to the day. And honestly, it's not just for kids either. I have it myself most mornings. It's brilliant as a pre-workout or a pre-training type meal, as a quick breakfast, or even just to get you through that afternoon slump without reaching for coffee or junk food. So if you've been looking for a healthier, easier breakfast for your family and you'd like to help us keep Parents with Questions free for everyone, we'd really appreciate your support. Head over to Rocket Fuel. It's www.rocket, R-O-C-K-I-T, fuel, F-U-E-L.com, rocketfuel.com. Grab yourself a bag. There's a link in the show notes. You'll be supporting your own family's health first and helping us continue with Parents with Questions mission second. Now let's get back to today's conversation.
Yeah, I'll speak a bit to that. I think that our expectations of what we want and what we need in relationship and in life have expanded. And I think with that, at the same time, we're under a lot of couples, a lot of families, a lot of individuals are under more stress than ever before. You know, life is busier than ever, and it seems that with all the tech, some of which is amazing, that enables us to do more, just means that we're having to do more, you know, and whereas one generation ago, Adam, you and I, Aaron's like a slightly younger generation, but we didn't have mobile phones growing up. There wasn't even email. You could go to work. I saw my parents as a child go to work, and Aaron would have been the same. They would go to work and they would come home, and that was the end of the day. And we're not having that. So we're being asked and expected to be on demand all of the time. And I think that because of that, a lot of people are under pressure and their nervous systems are much more activated. There's so many, through social media, we're seeing what so many others are doing. And so it's so easy to put expectations on ourselves of what we should be keeping up with. And so naturally, the more stressed we are, the more heightened, the less regulated we are, that impacts our capacity to relate and connect consciously and stay grounded when things do get upset. So A, we're more likely to react to something, and B, if something does happen, we have less resources perhaps within ourselves to handle that in a way where we're not actually making things worse.
I want to come back to that point of regulation because it's something I've got a question for you on, but let's be blunt, is that there's families who I've spoken to a lot of families over the last few years, and I've had a lot of stories of, parents who are split and they're co-parenting children, not always harmoniously. And then they're faced with an issue like vaccination, particularly around the COVID thing, and, where it literally becomes, and particularly in terms of, in this case, and I hate talking about vaccines all the time now, but, let's be honest, it was a life or death issue if you understood the implications, potentially. Not always, but potentially. So it's a pretty important one. Does what you are talking about apply in those extreme situations? Like when it's literally, this can be, the kid's well-being or future health and so on, or even their life. Is it still apply? I'm asking a bit of a vague question there, but I'm getting at. This is a big topic.
I think it perhaps even more so because, we co-parent. So I have 2 daughters from my first marriage, and we had to navigate that very topic. Okay. We chose not to be vaccinated. We have a son, and we were very clear we weren't vaccinating him, but the father of my daughters and his wife were. And so we needed to navigate that. And so you can imagine that conversation is going to happen very differently if I'm at a state where I'm totally freaked out, I'm panicking, I'm angry, I'm in the full fear, and there was a part of me that was deep in fear, right? It was scary times, and the fear of what might happen with my daughters, and knowing that my voice was a very small voice in the sea of mass hysteria. But I tell you what, if I had have approached and we had have approached their dad from this place of us versus you, we're right, you're wrong, don't you understand, attacking, all of that, the conversation can't go well. Whereas if we are both allowing myself as a human, as a mother, to feel what's going on with me, but also have the tools to actually stay grounded and remember what's really important and have my rational brain on, so I can think, okay, I know their dad, what's the best way that I can communicate what I need to say in a way that he will hear, not so as to manipulate, but so that he understands where I'm coming from. So yeah, those relational skills are even more important then. If I had have come at him and just, aggressive and blah, 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 it would not have flown. Yeah.
Yeah. Good answer. That looked to me, I'm saying this and reflecting back, that was really the essence of our Parents with Questions campaign, which was ask better questions, be curious, and actually, get to understand each other. And that was a pretty unpopular thing to introduce as a topic back then. But equally, unpopular is not the right word, but it was unusual, right? No one was egging. Everyone was just saying, do this safe and effective. There's only one way to do it. And having conversations about it was almost taboo, even just to say, what do you reckon?
What I will share is how we navigated that was finding the commonality, because in those, when we've got different perspectives and different world views, it's very easy to fall into me versus you. And where we actually got on the same page was finding what we had in common, which was the girls' well-being. We made that the priority, and that's ultimately what allowed us to navigate that.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. The thing I was going to say earlier is this, and it's just, I have noticed, maybe it's a question for you, Aaron, with the men, with blokes, is being regulated, that emotionally regulated, I've noticed, maybe it's my projection, can often, I think, be an excuse for, it's like I'll rationalize my non-action by saying I'm being regulated and non-confrontational. And my response to that is, you should get off your fucking ass and go and fight for your family, young man. There's part of me just gets really agitated. Sorry for the language, listeners, but do you see that happening? What part of regulation can be mistaken for rationalizing non-action or lack of courage, or is there another version of that I'm missing?
Yeah, I would challenge the assumption that to be regulated is to be passive, because it's not at all. When we're dysregulated, we can actually, once again, to bring in that pendulum analogy, we can go one or two ways. We can either go, hyper, we can go fight, we can get agitated, or we can collapse. And collapsing is not being regulated. Being regulated is being centered, being clear, being sure in what we stand for and who we are, and being very clear and anchored in our truth. And that doesn't mean that we've got to fight. It just means very clear what we're standing for and being willing to defend it rather than fight.
So there mean different things.
Nuance, but yeah.
Yeah, there is. And do you see people bypassing that nuance and sort of falling back on it as have you noticed that with men around you at times where they'll ignore the nuance and use it as a bit of an excuse not to move, or not? Is it just something I'll pick it up on?
No, not in the men that I tend to work with. The men that tend to come to me tend to be on the more anger side and fighting. And again, to weave it back into patriarchy and a lack of emotional intelligence within men because of how we've been conditioned. Within patriarchy, men are allowed to feel one of two things, and that's either anger or lust. So anger is often socially acceptable for men to express within patriarchy, and many of us grew up around fathers that had anger and displayed it in unhealthy ways, and so we've kind of got the imprint or the message that it's okay for us to express that. And it is important to have a connection to our anger. It is the energy that allows us to have boundaries, and without it, we become a wet wipe and we just get walked all over. So it's important to have a connection with it, but we've got to be able to contain it and be able to work with it and not allow it to overtake us. And I know and again, to bring it into the relationship piece, like Greer grew up in a family where anger wasn't really a thing. And so then she's come into relationship with me and I was fiery, and I've had to learn to calm that and to cool that down. And Greer's also had to learn to strengthen and be okay in the vicinity or the environment of me. If I'm frustrated, it's okay. I'm not directing it at her. I'm not being aggressive. I'm being just angry.
Yeah, big difference, right?
Yeah. And he's literally said, like, babe, I'm allowed to be angry. And I've had to think, oh yeah.
Yeah, I've had that conversation more than once at my home as well.
I thought so.
But it's interesting though, like when you're saying this, I'm recalling the first speech I ever gave at a rally. The first rally I ever went to, I actually was on stage speaking at one. It was in Ballina in northern New South Wales, and in COVID, and I talked about parents of questions, and it was the beginning of that journey. And I actually spoke to the men at the end of that specifically and said, I want to talk to the men here. And I said, if you're anything like me, you grew up on John Wayne films and Rambo, kind of that's the model for manhood. And when I saw what was happening to our kids and what they were planning to roll out for them, I was like, go show me who to punch, show me who to fight, and I'll do it. That was my response. And I think nearly every bloke around me was like the same. And I equally at the same time realized that wasn't going to work and had to find a new way and, go into the state you're just describing, which is, well, I need to ask better questions and have conversations that'll actually make a difference, because we realized also that screaming blue murder at your relatives or people you cared about who didn't agree with you had zero, or it almost enforced their position rather than, it didn't invite anything other than disagreement or further division. So we had to find new ways to do it. So that was a big challenge and a learning point for me and a lot of blokes at the time. Is like, how do we actually fight in a way that is actually going to make a difference, and that's actually be regulated and have a conversation.
Yeah.
What a revelation.
Honestly, Adam, that's also like a really core, fundamental way we work in relationship with couples as well, because inevitably there's going to be conflict. And what happens when we're dysregulated and we are triggered and we do sense threat, like in those COVID times, there were real legitimate threats to our liberty, our freedoms, our health, well-being, our families. It was an intense time. And when we have that sense that, our power's been taken away from us here, and this will happen in relationship too, if we are feeling powerless, quite often we will tip up into that more attack, fight mode as a way of trying to regain power. But where we want to get to is being able to stand up for ourselves without trying to overpower the other person. It's called soft power, standing up without dominating. It's, again, like defending without attacking. It requires a type of strength that doesn't need to dominate. And when we're in fear and when we're perceiving threat, it's going to be really difficult to stay in that place of soft power.
I'm always respectful of, and this will invite comment, but I love watching Robert Kennedy Jr. at work and speaking. He just manages to maintain that sort of respectful, regulated sort of point of view and soft power, as you say. He doesn't cede his position, but he equally, doesn't lose his rag, which I think is incredible. Talk to this a bit further, if you don't mind, just that dynamic of, going to your work a little bit, of how two people fundamentally disagree on something, but can deeply, still respect each other and still have a functional relationship. What's the process? Because as you say, it's not something I got taught at school, I can promise you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the first start of the process is to acknowledge and remember that this person, that we're on the same team and that we're not here to fight one another. And so it's challenging if we have different perspectives, and we feel, particularly if there's a history in the relationship of feeling unheard, then one of the most common response to that is and often I was going to speak to this earlier about when you're talking about men who are being latent, so I might just kind of circle around in order to answer this question.
Yeah.
In terms of, Aaron's right, the men that you work with individually, it's often anger, but when couples come to us, quite often the man, not always, but there's more of a tendency for the man to be a bit latent, and it's often the woman who is leading or has initiated coming to work with us. And I think that what can often happen, I work with women individually also, and one of the most common things that a woman will say is like, I know I'm controlling and I don't want to control. I don't want to be the one who's controlling, but I am. And often it's because she feels like her partner's not firing up enough, like it's almost like she wants to be fought for, she wants to be led, but it's not happening, so she'll do it, and then that can create resentment very quickly. So it's always, whenever there's an issue, we often say, the fight about the dishes is never about the dishes. It's about someone feeling unsupported, someone feeling alone, someone feeling, whatever, and often there's a build up of things throughout the day, throughout the years, that then when you're over the dishes and someone said, oh, you missed something, you're always saying, I miss the dishes, and so the first thing is to remember, I love this person, where I want to be on the same page with you. We'll often say, I want to come back to love. We will just name that. And then we need to get curious, which you kind of dropped in earlier. Even if initially it's like, how the fuck could he be, what the fuck could he be thinking? Or what the fuck is she doing? But switch that to, wow, what could they be thinking? Because I literally cannot see why they would do that or why they would think that I would want that. But just actually to soften it to, wow, I wonder what they are thinking, because I do not get it. And just that curiosity is often compare it to like opening a jar. When a jar is just stuck tight, you just got to take that first little bit with the curiosity, and from there, an opening can unfold.
Yeah. And I think inherent within that curiosity is recognizing that I have my own unique perspective and Greer has her own unique perspective. And when I look at her, I can see that we're in a room and there's a bed in the room. But when she looks at me and we're facing each other, she can go, well, actually, this room has a window. And I'll be like, what are you talking about? There's no window in here. And she'll exactly the same. She'll go, no, there's no bed in here. What are you talking about? And coming back onto the same page and starting to be curious is to also recognize that by our very nature, our perspectives are always going to be limited. And there's a humility to that. So something I said to a couple yesterday, take this on as a mantra: seek to understand before being understood. It's like, really look to understand this person's perspective, because selfishly, when they feel understood, they're going to be really open to hear what you've got to say as well. But so many couples get caught up in being right. And there's another saying, you can either be right or you can be married.
Yeah. I think you told me that, Greer, at the workshop. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and the other important thing to remember, and it's hard, right? And this is why when we work with couples, I mean, you guys came to a 3-hour group workshop, which is great. But generally we're working with couples for months at a time, not years, but months, because it's hard. It's hard to become curious when we're feeling deeply hurt and we're really agitated. And so before we get curious, we need to actually, I need to ground myself a bit. I need to regulate myself so I can come back and actually open to a conversation. And as Aaron said, like if I'm needing to express myself and I can't imagine what Aaron's thinking, but then he hears me, okay, now perhaps I'm open to hearing him. But if we're focused on, well, okay, sometimes it dovetails. And so it's not just, okay, I'll just share everything that I need and then Aaron will just beautifully hear me and then reflect back everything and then he can share. Sometimes we need to it's a gradual process of gentle, conscious conversations. And there's a whole skill set around that. But grounding ourselves, remembering we're on the same page, getting somewhat grounded, and then getting curious are 3 really important steps.
I'm going to ask you about the tool or that process in a bit more detail. But first, I'm thinking as you're saying it, like, if you are on the same page and you care about each other deeply, what if you're, divorced and can't stand the sight of each other, but you got kids together and you still need to have the conversation? Does this still apply? Does this still work? Because there's people listening in that position, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So what I will say is, how do I say this? I am divorced. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And, in some lenses, the father of my daughters has very different worldviews than me. And, I don't want to sound wishy-washy, spiritual bypass, but for me, I've always kind of focused on what's really important is A, the girl's well-being, and B, kind of like what Aaron was saying, finding the common ground, but I guess just really focusing on what is really, really important and letting all of that other stuff go so that you can really focus on what's important. And that's really hard. And I'm very blessed that I don't hate him. We we co-parent very well. And a big part of that, I think, whilst remaining humble, I've been very conscious to let a lot of stuff go so that I could and we've done this together, focus on what's really important. What do you want to add to that, Aaron?
Well, having gone through our own healing journey together, knowing how impactful it is on the children when mother shits on father or father shits on mother, because that child is born from that parent. And when the other parent shames, so if, say, for example, and I can speak to this, having gone through parents that divorced and didn't get along well, if the mother speaks badly about the father, then the child internalizes that and will actually shut down parts of themselves that resonate with that parent. So for me, I shut down aspects of my masculinity when my mum would speak badly about my father. And on my healing journey, I've had to reclaim those parts that were shamed, judged, or made wrong because of how she would speak about him. And even though it's not directly at me, kids are selfish. They take everything personally and make everything personal. So it's in the interest of the children. If you love your children, it's within their interest that you create a respectful, it doesn't have to be loving, it has to be respectful connection with this person.
Yeah, good answer. That's. I've got a mate in that situation at the moment, and he was on a few weeks back and saying, she's done this, and you're back and forth, and he kind of trying to make his point. I said, mate, and I just pulled this before I spoke to you guys, but I said to him, mate, the only thing important here is not whether you're right or wrong; it's whether you get a relationship with your daughter. That's it. She's the only thing that matters here now. She might be a crazy cow, whatever, you don't like her, fair enough, but your daughter's what counts. So do it for her. Tell us just to go in a little bit without sort of, the full expose, but what's the process that you have developed or are using look like? Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Our brand is called Awakened Intimacy. Well, Intimacy for Couples is our business. And then what we deliver is called Awakened Intimacy. And it's a process of how to turn your relationship into like a crucible or a container for healing, growth, transformation, and connection, because they're all inherently related. So we start with, and this is what separates us from regular therapy, we start with embodiment and having a connection to our nervous system and our body, because we need to be regulated to be able to use relational tools. Like when you're triggered, like you revert into a primitive part of your brain, and when you're in that place, your brain, your body, your nervous system doesn't care about connection. It just wants to get its own way. So having a connection to your nervous system is also really important to create empathy and being able to feel the other person. So many women complain that their partners don't feel them because so many of us are conditioned to be in our minds, and we come at relationship from a place to problem solve or fix, or if she's got something going on, here's the answer to your problem. And so empathy is also through body to body. And then we work in showing couples what's going on when they're triggered, how they can contain that part of themselves that doesn't care about connection. We call that part the adaptive child. And this is where knowing our history and how we've been conditioned becomes really important, because when we are triggered and we revert into that primitive part of our brain, we start to play out all the ways that we were either conditioned to be as children or we were allowed to be with no boundaries. So this is why when we're triggered in relationship, it's the past coming into the present as an opportunity to be integrated so that we can also bring the unconscious to the conscious and therefore be free of the past to create a new future, which I know, Adam, for you is really big. Like, we want to create a new, better future for our children. We don't want to pass on, I'm just hearing a biblical term, the sins of our fathers.
Absolutely.
Right? We're not wanting to pass on those generational curses and ancestral traumas. That happens in relationship. There's only so much you can do in individual therapy. At the end of the day, our attachment wounds get triggered in relationship. And when our children are challenging us, it's also an opportunity for us to reclaim and reparent our own inner child. And that's why these relational skills are foundational. They are the evolutionary edge of where we're being asked to grow as human beings.
Yeah, that's a huge point, Aaron. I think, and look, I'll add to that on a practical level, the consciousness that allowed us to get to this current state of uncertainty, chaos, and I'll just say generally a shit show in terms of, in Australia at least, what we're living in now. If you continue that consciousness, and it's going to create more of the same. We either got to transcend it or expect more of the same. And I think I said that early on in Parents of Questions. We need to give our kids the ability or the conscious or the tools to have the consciousness to see further than we can and operate better than we can. That's kind of my version of that. Yeah. Okay. So, look, on that note, as you know, I've been involved with creating movements, and we've interviewed amazing lady last week called Dion Payne, who has a co-housing and Women for Homes project where women over 55 are going to live together in these co-housing type communities. We've started the Family Farm project, which was a crucible, as you put it, of how do people interact and treat each other in a new paradigm with a new opportunity. And there's been a lot of great movements and things come out of this last 5 or 6 years crisis, if you like, that have been incredibly well intentioned and haven't always done as well as they could. And that's normally come down to the people, how we interact. And I'll include myself in that as well, by the way. I'm not passing the buck. But, communities, cooperatives, intentional villages, new ways of relating, co-parenting, all these things are fairly new. Well, they're old concepts which are new to us, I guess. Why is community hard? Why is that element of it tend to break down? Even at, I've seen very high level people, much smarter than me, get together to create collaborative movements to shift, health paradigms and things, and they go through the same stuff invariably. Sure. What's going on there, or is there a broad sort of answer you give to that, or?
I'll
a different
start and then
framework.
Aaron can add on. I think community is hard because being human is hard. And, my relationship with myself is complex. And so my relationship with Aaron, who I love, who deeply, and we've done so much, can still feel complex and hard. And then there are times like we have made our son, right? So then sometimes straight away, if we have then another person, that's like what now, rather than just my relationship with me and my 100 aspects of my psyche and my soul and all that I'm trying to navigate, then I've got another person to navigate. Then we bring in our son, even though we're a trinity, right? Mother, father, son, so tight, that automatically puts pressure. And so then if we bring on, we've got our daughters, then they're in, and then we live with my mum. Then we bring in our dog, right? All of a sudden, it just, and then we have people drop in. And so there's more. So the more people we have, the more people there is to deal with. And all of us have our stuff going on. So I think on one level, as above, so below. And I think that sometimes, as kids, many of us aren't taught how to acknowledge when we've been upset, whether it's our stuff or whether it's someone else. And then also how to actually name this in a way where I'm taking responsibility, but also actually asking for what I need or what I'm wanting, and then staying curious about the other person and all of that. So I think sometimes in communities, the focus can get on the project or the mission, which is very important. But if we forget the human aspect, then, as you're saying, it just falls wayside, and it's really sad when that happens.
Yeah, and the more important the project is, the more chasms or schisms or whatever you call it exist, because they are, it needs to happen, and they want it to see it work, and people get very invested in it, and it heightens that, I guess.
Yeah, there's a lot at stake.
So that, how does your framework apply in that larger context? Is it?
Yeah,
it sounds like a pretty complex question to address, but what are your thoughts?
To put it simply and to reweave something I said earlier, like inherent within any relationship is a power dynamic, and that can be overly empowered, where we're controlled, we dominate, and this can be even subtly, like being right, being attached to being right is a way that people control and dominate in relationship, or we can be disempowered. And like I can speak, like I had a men's community project that was happening here a year or two ago, and that collapsed as well because one of the leaders within that got on a bit of an ego trip and started being unrelational. And by that, I mean he was dominating conversations. It was his way or the highway, and there was no meeting in the middle. At that time, I was standing up for myself with respect, not tolerating dysfunctional behavior and calling it out respectfully, not making him wrong or bad, but also standing up and calling it out. And that was met with a whole heap of blame, criticism, judgment, and pushing it away. And I could see that there was a threat there, and he was going into that overly empowered state. But he wasn't able to come down off his high horse. Wasn't able to meet me in the middle and be able to see where I was coming from. And so that whole thing disintegrated. And interestingly enough, he also has a trail of broken romantic relationships behind him as well. So why I'm saying this is because if it's happening in intimacy, in a close relationship, it's going to happen in other relationships. And how we navigate power respectfully and share that power is how a community can grow and work together. And it's also a skill, like repairing and saying sorry is a skill. Knowing how to communicate when we're triggered is a skill. Having the emotional intelligence to know what's going on when there's conflict is a skill. So, and that's why, yes, they start with great intentions, just like couples that love each other at the start. often fall out of connection, not because they don't love each other, it's because they don't know how to navigate the difficulty, the humanness, as Greer said.
As Aaron said, it'd be interesting, and we haven't gone into a large community and done this work, although we're down for it. But we could if anyone wants us. And actually, we have been involved in a couple of communities, and we knew that our role in the community. So perhaps the answer is this: within any community, within any project, then just as there's someone who's organising the finance, someone who's doing the socials, there needs to be the relationships within the community and network itself, within the movement, needs to be of primary focus. And that, again, everything is that mirror, the micro to the macro. It's like in a marriage when a couple focuses on the kids, the money, the work, maybe their health, their gym, all those things, but they're not prioritizing their relationship. It fractures out. And relationship, as human beings, we're relational beings. And when we lose that, everything else falls apart. And that's also why when we do work with couples and they get better at identifying their needs, naming their needs, learning how to have that shared power rather than controlling or latency, that their relationship, they'll change jobs, they'll have a change in finances, they'll have shifts with their kids, everything ripples out from there because their capacity to relate human to human has been prioritized. So perhaps that's those movements need to have a clear priority on managing the humans.
It's interesting. As you're saying that, I had a mate up in Byron who pre-COVID went about setting up an eco village with a lot of moving parts, a lot of people, 400 something families. Great vision. I was really in awe of what he was doing. And one thing I think he did was very clever and I really respected was rather than start with put your money down, let's buy a property, and he had the whole model there, but he said the first step is he had everyone attend these big non-violent communication type workshops together. And so he started with this as the first element, which unfortunately it didn't kind of play out to great. It didn't actually work in the end. It fell apart before it got going, unfortunately. But I think it was a good move, and I think it was an early iteration of what you just said. But let me ask you this: this is such a fundamental thing, such a fundamental human skill, particularly if we want to live in a peaceful and community-driven world, which is what most people now are sort of reverting back to. I hear that a lot. They throw that word around a lot, saying, we need more community, more community. But the reality of it works out differently. At what point, and you may not have an answer for this, but how the hell have we not had this skill? How is it not? Have we lost it somewhere along the line? Has it been, beaten out of us? Have we given it over? Are we being infantilized by the government somehow? Or, what's going on in that we don't have this as a fundamental sort of baseline in our emotional armory, I guess, or toolkit?
Yeah. Yeah, it's patriarchy. It's the degrading, the judgment, the belittling of feminine qualities, feminine being emotional, feminine being connection. In patriarchy, it's about the individual, it's about achievement, it's about what I can gain. Emotions don't have a place. And the remedy to patriarchy isn't matriarchy. It's not swinging the pendulum all the other way. What our mentors shared with us is it's holyarchy. It's men and women standing side by side, respectfully, in our wholeness, having a balance and integration of both masculine and feminine qualities, being able to be boundaried but also compassionate, being able to be assertive but also empathetic. And this is also something that's cultivated in relationship when we embark to become more conscious, to undo these patterns from the past, to work through our triggers and our inner child wounds. Inevitably, we come into this greater state of balance. We start to balance our logic, and our emotions, our heart and our mind. It's an integrative way of being. We need to integrate the two poles of our being to be whole, because when we're out of our wholeness, we experience lack. We don't feel like we're enough. We don't feel worthy. We have self-esteem issues. And when we have those self-esteem issues, that's when those power imbalances happen. Our relationship with ourself and our self-esteem impacts whether we're going to try to dominate and control a situation, or we're just going to let others take the reins and walk all over us.
Yeah, gotcha. Good answer. You give me a lot to think about as you're saying this, but it's interesting that you say about patriarchy, because there is that imbalance. I've noticed this, and I hear this reflected back a lot by a lot of other men who say the same, is that it's almost like the women's lib movement obviously was necessary at the time, but equally it's kind of had a lot of men feel a bit browbeaten, and they kind of give up their manhood and expect the women to sort of take the lead, and it's not a balance. It's the opposite. And I think that center point of equality, or whatever, not equality, but equal evidence of power, is a much better model. And it's a good distinction from, I'm just a bloke, I'm wrong all the time, and, it gives women free rein to tell us what to do all the time. Do you agree? Is that a part of it? The women's lib movement has sort of pushed it too far, or am I just projecting on that?
No, I would agree. I would agree, as I said, a necessary liberation and a step out of patriarchy. And like anything, it's got light and dark. Like there's a shadow side to it. And I was raised with that there was aspects of my masculinity that were shamed and made wrong. And I've had to reclaim that.
Yeah. And as a woman, I'd like to speak to that too, that I think that there's so much to speak to here. And it's interesting, my daughters are 12 and 15, and they're both, the oldest one's playing footy and the young one's been wanting to play footy. And I've said no again this year. And I said, okay, well, you can next year. But we've had ongoing discussions, I'll call them, about why they haven't been able to play footy until now. And I've said, look, a part of me is like, I just feel like women, we have different bodies, It's not that you can't play footy, but I don't think women's bodies are made for playing footy. Like, yes, you can be strong, and yes, get into it and whatever. You don't have to be this soft, fluffy princess. Have grit, but we're not men, we're women. And just like, how foreign it is for, I would say, the majority of girls and young women and even grown women to actually have a rest when they're on their bleed, and for families, it's just, you just bang in a tampon and go horse riding. Like, that's not how we're supposed to be. We're lunar creatures, we're cyclical creatures. And I think whilst, the pill, amazing, it gave women a choice as to whether they were going to conceive or not. This is important. Voting rights, and I wasn't alive and I didn't grow up not being able to vote and not being, I think the pay is still discrepancy. But so as Aaron said, that pendulum needed to swing, and there was a lot of gifts in that. But it also, with the pill, all of a sudden there's this magic pill. Oh, great, I don't actually need to connect with my body. I can just skip a period. I mean, before I was conscious, I had something in my arm that I didn't have to bleed for 6 years. And I thought, great, I don't get my period. That's what I thought. I had no idea. It didn't even occur to me that that actually might not be a good idea. So I think that all of this is stemming and mirroring a deeper connection from self and a deeper connection from nature, and that we are animals. We're supposed to be cyclical, we're supposed to be rhythmical, and with the influx of technology, and didn't just start with the Industrial Revolution, but we've disconnected more and more from the earth and from nature, and therefore community, because we're less reliant in some ways on community, because we can we can fend for ourselves to some degree, in some perspectives. So, and I think, this is kind of going off on a bit of a tangent, but I'm revisiting the story of Mary Magdalene at the moment, who was one of Jesus's followers. And I just see what the church has done and the impact of that on the role of woman and the importance of having women in leadership. And I think not allowing women in leadership for hundreds of years has had a huge impact. And so we're reclaiming that. But again, the pendulum has swung, and now there's all these boss babes and, and just, so there's so much to say there.
Well, I just want to speak to what I often see happen with men when they react to toxic feminism, which is a thing, is they'll often try to revert back to a rigid gender role and thinking that man is leader, man is provider, and we see some of that within the manosphere, and that is not the antidote to toxic feminism, because how these masculine feminine qualities play out in a relationship is going to be unique to that couple. Like, to be honest, Greer has really strong, healthy, integrated masculine. She can take action often more than I have capacity for. And that's something I've had to and continue to face and know that I'm enough, even on the days where I'm low in energy and Greer's like got the reins and she's charging forward. I've got to know that I'm still lovable and enough, even if I can't do and achieve as much as my woman at times, right? And for some couples, having that traditional gender role works. Great, good on you, but don't think that applies to everyone. Don't stop painting everyone with the same brush. Some men naturally have a more feminine or relationship or connection to their feminine, and some women naturally have more of a connection to their masculine qualities. What's really important is not just to play it out without doing the work, because a lot of women and a lot of men, because of trauma, because of conditioning, get put into different poles, and it's not actually who they are in their essence. Some women will go into a more masculine pole because that's how they learnt to stay safe. But if they actually undid the trauma of their childhoods and all the times they had to stay rigid and stay strong to keep themselves safe, they might actually find that they're actually a very soft feminine being. That's not always the case. Some women naturally are just more masculine. So it's up to the couple to find out what authentically they are.
Yeah, and
Go ahead.
So what Aaron said, 100%. And again, it's like using the relationship for those days where, as Aaron said, I do naturally have this fire. And Aaron will say to me, baby, you doing this from this fear, I've got to get it done? Or is it coming from this place, oh, I'm really inspired? So again, not even making the fire and that capacity right or wrong. And there are, most of the time, thankfully now, I am just coming from inspired. And it's like, I can feel it. I'm actually not pushing myself beyond what I have capacity for. But because I also have capacity to really go deep and just keep going, I've had to learn, and Aaron has helped me. And this is where relationship comes into, our partner can help us awaken to those blind spots that we hadn't seen, of recognizing, oh, right, I wasn't aware. I was actually, I kept going from fear. So we had to get it done rather than actually, and needing to rest. Just Aaron's point around particularly women who have been in a violent and traumatic situations, that it's very common for them to take on that protection, that hard and that tough, not just persona, but whole way of being, because they did need to do it, and it did serve them at a time. And then when they come into safe relationship, and really we have a huge focus on cultivating deep safety within relationship, is that then they can finally soften. And then quite often the man will rise and expand in his presence and his capacity to hold her. But if she doesn't soften, he can't do that. So it needs to be this interchange, and not all the time too. That those energies can also flow in between both polarities.
So that's, as you say, that I'm sort of wanted to ask this. I mean, do you still is there equally a space or invitation for men to really embrace their warrior man, full testosterone, charged up space? Because it's not encouraged anymore. And it's not a lot of space for it. We're kind of made wrong for it. As you said, it's branded as angry and everything's wrong with us as blokes because we don't have all the, touchy-feelies going on all the time. But, where is the space for men, if there is one in your opinion, maybe Aaron, to be full-on alpha male, protect my family, fight for whatever's right, that kind of persona?
Yeah, I'm 100% agree, Adam. 100%. In fact, I'm not interested in attending any men's work if it doesn't have that, because I have so much emotional intimacy and therefore integration with my wife in our relationship. I don't go to men's spaces looking to tap into my emotions and have safe spaces for that. I want to go to men's spaces where I can actually express the part of myself that isn't safe around women and children, that is that fire. And Adam, there are spaces, but you just got to find them. I'm involved with them. I went to a gathering last year called the Gathering of Men up in southern Queensland.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be leading and facilitating a gathering down here in Tasmania next year called Tasman Gathering. And I can assure you there'll definitely be space for that fire, that warrior nature, because in my opinion, that's why we need men's work.
Yeah, gotcha. Good stuff. All right. It's because as you know, I come from Byron Bay. There's a lot of encouragement for men to sit around and wearing, yoga pants and being touchy-feely, and it's like, nah, doesn't, I don't throw it all out entirely, but it's some of them just need a shot of testosterone, to be blunt, in my opinion. It does feel that way. Look, we're running out of time, so I'm going to wrap this up for you. Doing this as leading workshops, counseling people as a couple, what's that like for you two? Does it put pressure on you to be perfect and have it all sorted out, or what's it like in your world, coming from that perspective where you've got this expert status on it, if you like?
Yeah.
I know that's not how you claim yourselves, but what's it like from your perspective?
Well, it's interesting because it feels like it's lessened now. For quite a long time, we had what we named a practitioner's curse, in that because we naturally have a very harmonious relationship. We've navigated very deep things together, but we don't naturally fight a lot. We're very complementary, but what we would find is we would have something come up between us, and it was so foreign to us, and we'd have to navigate it, and then I swear to God, the next day, or within 24, 48 hours, we'd be working with a couple and it was that exact same dynamic. And what couples love about working with us, and the feedback we get from every single couple we work with, is that they love and how we differentiate ourselves from traditional therapy that can be that very much that therapist role behind the clipboard, analyzing, critiquing. We, as Aaron said, relationships are healed in relationship. And so we teach, yes, from the frameworks that we've studied and we've trained in, but when we give examples, we're talking about what happened last week or 5 years ago, something between us, and that's how couples learn. And because the idea of relationship isn't to never have disconnect. It's about learning, how do we repair and how do we come out of that repair where we not only just compromise, but we've actually gone deeper because of it, and we understand one another better. We've taken greater responsibility for our partner, and we actively help one another meet our needs.
Yeah.
It goes back to what you said at the beginning. It's the crucible. It starts at home. It starts in there, and it's a really good analogy, or a good point to bring back to, is the relationship is the crucible, and how we grow in movements out and communities out, and even political shifts and cultural shifts. It arguably all stems back to that as the learning point, or the teaching ground, or the where we figure it out in real time and then project it onto the world.
Mm-hmm.
How do people find out more about working with you and what's coming up for you guys? How do people interact if they're interested?
Yeah, so people are welcome to connect with us on our website, www.intimacyforcouples.com. We've got a free masterclass happening next week. It's called Healing the Divide on Divine Union, and we're going to be doing a series of masterclasses over the coming months.
Yeah, and we also have the Awakened Intimacy podcast, and we're on socials, well, on Instagram and Facebook at Intimacy for Couples.
You shoot me through all the links, so I'll make sure on the show notes for you.
Will do.
What's your as a parting shot or a parting thought? You got, as you said, 2 girls, 15, 12, your little boys, what, 6, 7?
6. Mm-hmm.
6. What's your the term I've been using a lot lately, or the phrase, which is, we create the world we want our children, we most want our kids to inherit. What do you hope that your work creates for them to inherit? What do you hope for them as a result of your contribution?
To know they're enough as they are, and to have that healthy self-esteem, because it's from that place that they can actually create a paradigm and a community that has equal respect.
Yeah, and I think for me it's to really model what healthy vulnerability looks like and what self-care looks like, and how to have boundaries, and that they learn that from watching Aaron and I navigate that together as a couple, individually and within a family.
Beautiful. Thanks, guys. Been a pleasure today.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Adam. Cheers.